Friends, interment will take place at Adat Shalom Memorial Park Cemetery. At the family's request, we will not be traveling in procession to the cemetery. Anyone wishing to attend the interment at the conclusion of the service, return to your car, drive on your own to the cemetery, and we will allow ample time before continuing with the committal service. The family will be sitting through Thursday evening at the residence, 6623 Pleasant Lake Court in West Bloomfield, for friends to call. Religious services will be conducted Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. The Shiva hours are as follows. Today, from 3 p.m. till 5 p.m., then resuming from 6:30 till 8:30. And then on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 1:30 p.m. till 4:30, and then resuming from 6:30 till 8:30. It is suggested for those of you who wish to further honor Joan's memory may do so by means of a contribution to the Bird Center of Michigan or to Yad Ezra. We have this charity information as well as directions to the residents on these printed out sheets in our lobby, which you may obtain at the conclusion of the service. Thank you.
Our service begins with the 23rd Psalm. Adonai ro'i lo echsar b'noteshe yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yenahaleni, nafshi yeshovev yancheni v'magletzrek l'man shemo, gam ki elech begeit salmavet lo irara ki ata imadi. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So much of the liturgy that we hear at a funeral service is familiar. 23rd Psalm, in a moment, a reading from the book of Ecclesiastes. And then there are readings that have been part of our tradition for a far shorter time, but are often heard, and they speak to us in ways that remind us of the very many moments we share with those we love. The following reading is the reading just before Kaddish on Kol Nidre in our congregation, and I'm sure many of you have heard it before. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage, from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness, and often back again, from health to sickness, and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat. Until looking backward or ahead, we say that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage made stage by stage, from birth to death to life everlasting. And our final biblical reading comes to us from the book of Ecclesiastes. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. As we say the words, Adonai Natan v'Adonai Lakach, Yishem Adonai Mavarach, the Lord has given, the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. At this time, speaking on behalf of the family, we'll begin with Lenny, followed by Howard, and then Bob.
So good to see everyone here. It all happened far too fast. Ellen and I were getting serious in our relationship. She said, "My parents want to meet you." I lived in a one-bedroom apartment, a third-floor walk-up across the street from the hospital parking lot in Hyde Park. And I was sick with the flu. Joan and Herbie walked up 3 flights. They may have even given me a hug. Those were the pre-COVID days. Wow, she was so young. As I got to know Joan, in many ways she was so different from my own mom. My mom, raised in the Depression era, was roughly the same age as Joan's father, Jack. Joan was a child of the post-war period. She had a beautiful home in the suburbs, a wonderful family, a pool in the backyard, Frank Sinatra playing on the stereo. She was young, beautiful, surrounded by a large, loving family and so many friends. Their home was filled with fun and laughter. But there was so much more. Things weren't always completely idyllic, and Joan was in no way a two-dimensional person. She was the center and the scaffold of the family. She was a voice of love, empathy, and support. She organized the household, offered wise advice when asked, made difficult decisions, and was part of the chorus of laughter that permeated the house. As the years rolled on, she and Herbie were there to meet us when we brought Hannah home. It was love at first sight. Hannah named her Nani. Visiting her in Michigan, Hannah always had the most fun with the toys that Joan had for her. Then there was the trip with Joan and our family to Disney. We all laughed when we called Herbie back home, and Hannah, out of nowhere, said, "Papa, we're at the hotel." When Jordy was born, Joan was there in the delivery room with Hannah. No doubt this was the first delivery she consciously witnessed, since she was likely under sedation for her own children's births. I know this was a very moving experience for her. Subsequent trips to Michigan with Ellen, Hannah, and Jordy eventually went from joy to sadness about a year later as Herbie got sick and eventually passed. As Joan moved out of the house on Wendy Brook to her new apartment, trips to visit became joyful again. We would visit with our dog Nellie, who once decided to eat a whole tray of Joan's chocolate brownies, which of course led to a side trip to the animal ER. In the years after meeting Joan began to live again. She was filled with happiness. They traveled, they laughed, and they loved. Visiting with our family was so much fun, whether we were on the boat in Pleasant Lake or on the beach in Florida. She was always there to make our stay so much fun and memorable. After Joe's passing, there was a real sadness that we could feel with Joan. She was more inward than she had been, than we had ever seen her. When we visited this past Thanksgiving, it was very clear to all of us and to Joan that this extremely independent woman could not live alone anymore. We all made the decision for her to come back with us to Evanston until we could arrange caregivers back here in Michigan. What we did not foresee was emergency surgery on December 6th, and then unexpectedly finding that she also had lung cancer. With the help of a compassionate medical team, the support of Ellen, Lauren, and Michelle, she decided not to pursue an extended course of treatment. She was surrounded those last weeks by her daughters, who were always by her side, and also by her grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and all family who were there to visit and comfort her. And also our dog Nala, who always brought out a really big smile in her. She also had the good fortune to have had the most wonderful caregivers, Luz and Sandra, who were there with her day and night. We were blessed to have Joan in our home. She loved sitting by the fireplace, watching the birds at the bird feeder, and always giving the thumbs up when we asked if she wanted some chocolate ice cream. I'm sure it wasn't easy for Joan, this woman who developed such independence following the loss of two partners, to allow herself to be so dependent on so many of us. In the end of this part of her story, it was a blessing this past Shabbat as we sang prayers, psalms, and songs to her after candle lighting. Later that night, with her daughters all under our roof, we said goodbye as her body and soul parted.
So many familiar faces here. Thank you all for coming here to say goodbye to Joan. I was in Chicago. We were in Florida, and we flew up to Chicago. I flew up to Chicago to see Joan 3 weeks ago. And I said goodbye then. But it was in a room filled with the rest of the family. I was in the middle of the room, and I looked up, and all around me were the family, and they're all crying. And they knew I was saying goodbye, and it's only natural to do that, but I couldn't complete it exactly. So I wrote a letter to Joan, and I'm going to read you the letter that I wrote last night. Dear Joan, for the past few days, all these memories have I can't even read my own writing. have floated through my mind. It's like light coming through the trees while the wind is blowing, bits and pieces like a mosaic, trying to put together a great puzzle. We said goodbye in Chicago 3 weeks ago in front of a room full of people. These are some of the thoughts I've had since then. My earliest memories of you happened when you took me to the shul on Humphrey Street in Detroit on Simchas Torah. All those people marching with apples and sticks on Israeli flag sticks, stuck on Israeli flag sticks, singing and dancing. And the time you took me to a potato roast on an open fire at the empty lot down the street from the synagogue. Thank you for that. Even though your memory was a little fuzzy, you have to remember the time you were on the Auntie Dee show on television. You had on a beautiful satiny pink dress while you recited a dramatic passage from I Remember Mama. Unfortunately, the TV was black and white, and so nobody could see that beautiful pink color. And what a surprise it was to see your picture on the DSR bus when I was 11 and you were 16. You were voted Miss DSR. You never explained that to me. Sometime after, well, actually a bit after, Joan was married. And the next thing I know, they were living in the house with us. And my brother and I were displaced from one room into another room together. Maybe things were meant to be, you know? Anyway, Herb and you moved into the house, and then the two of you were a team for 41 years. They defied all odds, and they were a beautiful mixture of love, neuroses, incompatibility, everything that you can imagine. But looking back on it, it was a beautiful thing to see. And at one point, I came back to Detroit, and I was on my own for that year, and I lived with them. And it was great, even though I was such a jerk at the time that when she gave me dinner, I would pull out these cards, you know, like they rate them in the Olympics, and I'd put them out like this. And she said, "Can't you ever give me a 6?" I said, "I want you to keep trying." Anyway, Mom had physical and emotional problems, but you were always there for us, my brother and myself. It was a blessing to have you listen to our problems without judgment. No one could listen better than you, no one could laugh as well as you, and no one could empathize as well as you. Again, thank you for that. Joan, I'll have to tell all these people about our trip to New York City 6 years ago. Bob, myself, and Joan went to New York to celebrate Bob's 70th birthday. And we had a great time. And we ended up going to our son's restaurant that he's involved with in New York, and had prime seats. And I'm sitting on this side of the table, and Joan is over here, and Bob is over here. And in walks a TV personality, James Spader. And he sits right down next to Joan, right over here. And she's about this far apart. And she looks at us, and she's had a glass of wine, and she says, "I'm going to say hello." and Bobby looks at her, and he goes, "Don't do it. Don't do it. He's with his family. Leave him alone." And with that, she goes over with her glass, and she says, "Oh, Bobby, what do you think?" "Hello, Mr. Spader." And we laughed. It was so funny, and he was as gracious as he could be to her. But she had this look, you know, the face of my sister was such that anyone's going to submit to that look immediately. So it was so much fun. One last thing I'd just like to say. I could go on and on, but I just want to say this. While we were at breakfast this morning, Emily told me that they went to dinner last night, and my grandson, Max, made a toast. And he says, "I want to make a toast to everyone here at this table and those that are not at this table." And it really touched me, Max. So thank you. So, in essence, that's just a little bit of our sister, and I love you, Joan, and I'll miss you terribly.
the rabbi told me that we should write things down. And I'm not really good at doing it, and I realized that probably the reason was so that we would know when to stop. There's a saying by Rumi that gratitude is the wine of the soul, and I'm feeling drunk over my sister. What a beautiful soul. And I wanted to come up here to bear witness to something that is so unusual. As I was thinking about it last night, I think it should be in the Guinness Book of World Records. And that is that Joan had these sayings that she would do. Some of the sayings, I don't know where she got them from, and some of them she got from our mom. And we would do these sayings with each other all the time. But one of them that was totally hers was, you would say something to her, and she would go, "What?" She would say, "In my whole life of living, I never heard of such a thing." And in my whole life of living, I never, this is the truth, honest to God, I never had a crossword with my sister. We never had an argument, ever. That's how she was. And we had a lot of interaction. It's not like we didn't have interaction, so we didn't, have a chance to argue. We just never did. She was so sweet, so wonderful. One of the things that happened last night was that I went into the closet to find this suit that I never wear. And I saw a whole row of these shirts that I used to wear when I was a professional and I worked in an office. And she loved this shirt. And she would talk to me about, going to this one place that she really liked. I think she went with Herbie, called the Shirt Box. Yeah, everybody knows the Shirt Box around here. Well, she introduced me to that. And I would, she would give me gift certificates on my birthday, and I would go and get some shirts. And I have a whole closet full of them. They're bright and, colorful, this kind of thing. And last night, when I looked at the shirts, I realized that she was the person who actually started me getting these by giving me this present when I was in the 80s. She gave me a card, and it said, "Here's your birthday present. Go to this address in Southfield." I go to the address. It's just like a house. I go up there, and there's two women that meet me at the door. "Oh, we're waiting for you. Come on in." And I go upstairs to a bedroom. And there's a big chair in the room with lights around it. And they have me sit in the chair, and there was a fad in the early 80s, your colors by the season, winter, fall, summer, spring. Anybody remember this? And they're draping stuff over me. And anyway, I found the colors that they said would be good for me. And of course, I never wore those colors. And they asked me if I was shy as a kid, and I said yes. And they said, "Well, that's why you were buying stuff to make yourself invisible. And this will make you look good." So I have a whole thing of colors, and I could go out and shop real quickly. And every time I did, she would just love my shirts. She just went crazy for them, and I would always wear them when I, would go out with her and to the movies and lunch. And she started that thing. She started my collection. She supported that, and she was always doing that kind of thing for me. Of course, when we were younger, she totally saved us, my brother and myself, I think. And as a teenager, she opened her house up to my crazy friends and myself, and I really had no other place to go. I was, at that point, there was no other place. And it was just wonderful. She was just such a guiding light for me, and I will treasure her memory forever.
I could bring the two brothers back for an encore and for a meaningful statement. Both of them, all three eulogies. You know, when we remember someone we love, we want to be able to laugh. We said that last night. I said that last night. To remember the times that we were happy together, the little things that truly count and are so beautiful. So I'm going to have the opportunity to speak at this point, and I'm going to do a great deal of editing because we've heard some of the things I was going to share, and that's totally appropriate. So I'm going to begin with a little bit of history. Joan was born in New York, the daughter of Ada and Jack Rose, and we offer our condolences to her brothers, Howard and Lisa, Bob and Joan. Family moved to Detroit when Joan was 2 or 3, you told me. Both brothers have already spoken about the role that she played in your lives, and in many ways you expressed the thought that she saved you. But you didn't include the fact that she called an ambulance when one of her brothers broke his skull. But then even more interesting was the time when she called the fire department when your hand was stuck in the ringer. Now, there's a generation who might have no idea what we're talking about. Feel free to explain it later. And I, of course, I didn't realize we had moved from the hand wringer that I kind of recall to the electric wringer that made that possible. And then everyone spoke about the fact that she was blessed with 2 very special partners in her life. Married to Herbie, she was with Joe after his death, and she loved both of them. And I just enjoyed hearing each one of you speak about the various periods in her life. As her family indicated, Joan's presence in each of their lives helped to transform them in a very positive way. Her brother adding, both men had idiosyncrasies. Both of these were much better because of Joan. Ellen and Lenny, Lauren and Kathy, Michelle and Howard. I have notes from the time when I spoke when your father had died. You described your parents at that time, their marriage, in the following way, and I'm quoting, "Theirs was an example of a truly beautiful marriage. Our father would do anything for our mother. He was a romantic, a wonderful dancer, a true rarity, a husband who kept his wife playing golf with words of encouragement. Together, they created a home for the 3 of you. Each of you had, and we spoke last night about your own unique experiences, from growing up with a very young mom, recognizing that she was your rock, an amazing listener, a gentle soul. Wisdom came out of her. She had, and I love the term seichel, and we all talked about the many Yiddish phrases she used quite often and shared with members of her family. She was your inspiration. She loved adventure, and there's so many stories of adventure. She inspired you when it came a moment when you needed to lose some weight and stop smoking. She was your inspiration. And the way she practiced acceptance was so very important. And she gave of herself beyond what anyone expected. One other story. She did not have enough money for a coat that you needed. Now, this was a time, it was described to me, when men actually gave allowances to their wives. And you had a certain amount to spend in a week. It never worked in my home, but this must have been pre-credit cards. That's what it was. Now it's coming to me. She took all of the dollars that were allotted for a week and purchased the coat because she wasn't going to let you do without. And that was clearly so much a part of the way she viewed the world. And when you would sit outside with her, you could look up in the sky and see the clouds. And you would name what you were seeing, and she would find a way to bring that all together, bringing a sense of joy and of love. Your mom supported you when you went through 2 bouts of cancer. She was by your side. And she was, I never heard the term queen of mandelbread before, but that's what this woman was. And I then looked at the picture that you used when you were creating your own business. Wow, that business should have flourished with her picture on it, because the picture was truly, make sure you see this at some point, extraordinary. She was a real beauty. Your father was anxious about traveling. Your mom wanted to see the world, and she found her own sense of independence again and was able to do that. And she welcomed her daughter's partners into her life. And again, so many wonderful stories. You recall the way she organized family dinners on Passover and Rosh Hashanah, and in a complicated family setting, she made sure that everyone was welcome. She had a wonderful sense of humor, and what you described, and I'm not going to try to repeat it, as a very unique laugh. And that laugh will stay with you. She was generous and gracious, always accepting, had a way of offering advice that was meaningful. You could sit and have a very quiet conversation with her. I know that she was there and listening to everything. She was fully engaged. When anyone in the family had a question of what to do, how to do it right, a question of etiquette, she was the person that you would call, knowing she would direct you to make a reasoned and good decision. And you admired the way she took care of her mom. For 18 years, she shared her life with Joe. Now, you described to me how he just made the cut. She had a rule. Date no one over 70 or over. He was 69 and a half. He just made the cut. On a drive with the other Joan in the family, and there's so many stories of the Joans and Rosen put together, she spoke for 4 hours straight about the possibilities of this relationship. She was, as you described, and as everyone described, as like a giddy schoolgirl as this moment in her life was opening up. Her daughter-in-law, Andy, stated, "My dad met Joan. She spent 2 hours playing with a 4-year-old niece who invited her upstairs to play. Joe said to you, that's it. It is so beyond beautiful to have this woman in my life." And once again, with Joan, you were able to see that your father became a different person. Boating on the lake, wonderful partners, traveling the world. But I'll tell you, from my experience, the great joy in her life, Nani was blessed with grandchildren. Hannah, Jordan, Dana, and Sammy, and great-grandchildren, Roz and Nora. As you recalled your Nani, you shared stories of her clairvoyance. She was a critical thinker, but she also had unique experiences. I'm going to try to tell this correctly. Finding a Mickey Mouse watch on the beach when her husband died. It stopped, beeping, making noises after she met Joe. She had an awareness of the presence of those she had loved who had died. She felt them. She felt them on the bed next to her. A 5-year-old grandson was a little bit jealous when she began dating Joe. Where are you sitting? I like to, there you, oh, you moved to the, okay. Began dating Joe. Her response to this little 5-year-old, "Wild horses cannot keep me away from you." The perfect and memorable answer. Nani wanted to understand each of your perspective on life. 7 years ago, having shopped for food, she walked into the kitchen when her great-grandchild was being born in the house. Hearing the screams of labor, she immediately departed from the room, I'm told. Each of you recalling how she was the one who brought tradition into your lives, introducing so many expressions in Yiddish terms. Her role so clearly expressed with love. She knew how to make you feel seen, but not scrutinized. I thought that was a magnificent way to speak about the way a grandparent should live in relationship to a grandchild. Roz and Nora, you told us a story of unicorn glasses. Wow. And then you showed me a picture of other fun glasses, right, that she wore. She loved being with you two and making you smile. And when the two of you were with her, I want you always to remember that it made her so incredibly happy seeing what wonderful little girls you were, knowing that you were loved so much. As has been described, for the past months, Joan had her 3 daughters and others in the family by her side, with wonderful caregivers to help. The last period of her life, as you said, an opportunity for Joan to receive love and the support from each of you. I love the image of the night before she died. She left us, her family singing prayers, singing to her, probably holding on to each other as you held on to her, and every voice was heard. It was the first night when everyone was under one roof together. During her illness, the love that she had given to you throughout a lifetime, that selfless sense that you recognized, you were able to give back to her. You added, and she could finally receive it. She knew. It was a beautiful thing seeing her feel safe and letting go as the end of life approached. As our conversation was concluding, the following was added. The last months of her life, we dealt with illness. Tonight, in our conversation as a family, you recalled the vibrant, wonderful, warm, and loving person each one of you had in your lives. Now, I remember the years when Joan was engaged in the life of our congregation, raising her 3 girls. I have lots of memories from those times. She was a woman all of us liked, and that smile was incredible. She was beautiful, she was loved, and she will be remembered. And a little story was told to me just a few moments before the funeral that I was once delivering a sermon on the High Holidays, and I included the line of seeing a stone, a memorial stone in a grave, I'd rather be golfing. Instantly, before I said it, she knew that I was going to be quoting from that stone that I had been walking around and seeing. I'd rather be golfing, you'd rather be anywhere else. But the truth is, you're in the right place now. She's at peace. You took care of her. You loved her as she loved you. Joan felt the presence of her mother at one point, perhaps even calling her back to be with her. You will feel Joan's presence throughout your lives. Joan is at peace. We pray that her beloved soul has returned to the source of all life, has now returned to God. As I ask you to rise for the traditional prayers. El malei rachamim shochein b'amromim, hamsei menucha nachona tachat kanfei ashchina im kadoshim v'tahorim k'zoraki amazirim, et nishmat itka bas Yaakov Yehudit shalcha la'olama, ba'al harachamim yitzror b'tzror ha'chaim et nishmata. Adonai hu nachalata v'tanuach b'shalom ha'mishkava v'nomar amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to our beloved Joan who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your presence, and may her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. And let us all say, Amen.
We can have the pallbearers, please put your coats on, step forward, as well as the family. Your coats are right over here to your right. Put your coats on and you'll follow behind as we exit the building.